Hello, my friends! My name is Matt Leja, and I'd like to take you on a great Canadian adventure. So come along with me as I set off on a new journey to better understand life, nature, and the history of Canada that connects us all. The journey of 1,000 miles begins now.
Hello there, my friends. Thanks for joining me for this new series of Great Canadian Adventures. In this series, I want to take a closer look at the many people, places, and things that define us as Canadians. There's so many amazing historic places around here and inspiring stories to hear from the people in our community. And they often get overlooked, which is kind of sad. It makes sense to me to start local here in Eastern Ontario and then expand outward from there. Everything we're about to cover in this series of episodes has an important place in our heritage, and they deserve their chance to shine and be appreciated. In our adventures, we'll visit various hiking trails, wildlife reserves, sanctuaries, conservation areas, ghost towns, farms, homesteads, and much, much more. That said, let's take the first step in our series of journeys together, and what better place to start than right here at Maple Grove Farm, with one of the great staples of the Canadian diet, pure, artisan maple syrup.
Maple syrup is actually pretty cool stuff. Even though the chemistry behind its great taste is not quite fully understood, people have become very good at making that sweet golden syrup of deliciousness. It all started with the indigenous peoples of northeastern North America. They started making maple syrup a long time ago, way before the Europeans showed up. We don't exactly know when it was first discovered, but old legends tell of maple sap being used instead of water to cook the chief's venison. Many cultures believe that tree sap is a potent source of energy and nutrition, and there's actually a lot of science to back that up. Maple sap can be safely consumed, and it has many health benefits, but it can have a laxative effect, so you shouldn't drink too much. Native Americans used to use stone tools to carve out holes in the trees, and then place reeds or wooden spouts to feed the sap into their birch buckets. They would then boil off the water by dropping hot cooking stones into the sap, or by getting a little help from Mother Nature and letting the water freeze overnight and then removing the ice in the morning. The European colonists that came later would modify this process and add their own techniques. They would use augers to drill holes in the trunks and eventually metallic buckets to catch the sap. Nowadays, we have all kinds of high-tech methods for extracting and refining our sap. Some current methods use modern fuels such as oil and propane instead of wood, and an evaporator instead of a stove or a cauldron. Most people use plastic tubes now to run the sap back to their sugar shack, or to the place where they boil the syrup. I personally do things somewhere between the colonists and the modern methods. I like to keep it a little old school, but that's just me. I use buckets and a wood stove just like my grandfather did all his life. His method is tried, tested, and true, and I've seen it produce some really great maple syrup over the years. Collecting maple syrup the old-fashioned way gives me a chance to commune with nature and really appreciate the hard work that goes into every last drop of that maple syrup. It's also great exercise and quality fun time for the whole family. With 40 drops of sap going into every drop of maple syrup, you really don't want to waste any. So now that we know a little bit more about maple syrup, let's take a look at the process of how to make it.
Alright, so you want to know how to make maple syrup? Easy. All you need is 30 years and lots of experience. No, I'm just kidding. You actually do need that if you want to perfect it, because it is an art. But it's a lot easier than it may seem. Now, this place, Maple Grove Farm, I grew up here. This was my grandparents' place. My grandfather was the artisan maple syrup maker, and I watched him make it, along with my uncles, for many, many years. We're not quite ready to get started here this year. If you want to learn how to do it step by step, in action along with me, you can check out my vlog, which is coming up here at the end of the month in February of 2019. Right now it's a little early. The conditions are not ripe yet for making maple syrup, but I still wanted to walk you through the whole process because I've got lots of archived footage of this whole process from beginning to end, so I can share that with you now. Of course, as you can see, the cabin needs to be cleaned up. We gotta get everything ready, wash out and empty these buckets. I have a couple of pans there that need to be fixed that are leaking. So there's still some work to be done. I'm actually in the process of replacing the chimney, which I'll also cover on my vlog. But what are the steps to making maple syrup? Well, so number one, you gotta find some maples. You need to find maple trees. You can't make maple syrup without maple trees, right? So go find yourself some maples. Then, step number two, wait until late winter, early spring, and you'll know the time is right because it will be plus degrees during the day, minus degrees at night. And when it's been that way for 3 days, 4 days, a week, you're good to go. So again, it has to be plus 0 degrees, so more than 0 degrees Celsius. We are in Canada, so these degrees are in Celsius. And at night, it has to freeze. Basically, it has to drop below 0 degrees Celsius. Then, step number 3, when the time is right, you grab your spigots and buckets and everything you need, your drill, your hand drill, get everything ready, get out there, tap some trees, which I guess you could consider step number 4, and you stick a spigot in every tree. Now, there's different names for these. Some people call them spouts, some people call them spigots. En français, c'est un chalumeau. Doesn't matter what you call it. You gotta find some way, like the Native Americans did, to pierce the tree to get at that delicious sap and let it flow through something and also keep the hole open at the same time, which is key. The next step would be to set up your buckets, right? We're gonna set up our buckets under each spigot as a receptacle to make sure we catch all of that delicious sap. What's also important is to check your buckets daily, sometimes multiple times a day if it's really running. And usually the hotter it is during the day and the colder it is at night, the more the sap will want to flow. The next step, step number 5, would be to collect the sap. We're going out to the trees, we're grabbing every bucket and we're putting it into a bigger bucket and we're filling up a whole bunch of buckets and we're coming back with them hopefully in one trip. Not usually, but it does happen sometimes. Anyway, find a way to get that sap back to the place where you're gonna boil the sap. Step number 6 would be to then get ready to boil your sap. But before you do that, the real step number 6 is actually to filter the sap. We need to filter off all the crap that's got in our sap, that sap crap, and remove all the sticks, all the leaves, all the bugs that have gotten in there, because you're going to be going into spring. So there's going to be a lot of bugs waking up and coming to life. So we need to scoop those out of there so we're not boiling them off and adding unnecessary extra protein to our sap. Step number 7 would be to then filter again to something with a smaller micron or a cloth that has fibers that are more tightly woven together to filter off then even more of the impurities. We want to filter off as many of the big impurities as possible before we start boiling, so there's less foam scooping. It gives a clearer product in the end. Step number 8, boiling the sap. So for us, as you can see here, we have 3 pans. I'll give you kind of a look at what that looks like here from the inside. And you can imagine, as I'm probably demonstrating here in the video, you can boil 3 pans at a time. They will progressively get thicker if you're doing it right. You should have one pan that's your finishing pan that has the thickest product that you're slowly adding to. The other 2 you're kind of boiling off at the same rate, trying to keep the level even at the same height. Boiling, 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 boiling. Batches like this take sometimes in excess of 5 or 6 hours. It's not uncommon to be standing here for 6 hours, so be prepared. Take breaks if you have to, but it should be nice and warm in your cabin so that you can boil for extended periods of time. So as you're boiling, I guess this could be considered step number 9. As you're boiling, you're also scooping off the foam. And the reason for that is that with the foam comes the impurities, and all the impurities in the sap get filtered through the foam. You're scooping it up. All the liquid falls through your device, whatever you decide to do, whether it's a strainer or in this case we have a welded custom device. But I mean, you can do anything. I mean, it's not a device, it's just a scoop with holes in it. But whatever, as long as it's functional, as long as it works, that's what matters, to get that foam out of there until it's back down to a clear liquid. And then once it starts to foam up again after another half hour, after a little while, you will want to scoop it again. Keep scooping it, have a bucket beside somewhere like this where you can just tap it on the side and get that foam out of there. Sometimes I like to come along with the strainer here with that. What's that thing called? That colander. Is it a colander?
Yeah, I thought it was.
Okay, whatever. There's another name for it. Come along with that thing and that'll get even more of the really fine stuff that this other custom tool can't get. But for the most part, you know, as far as the scooping goes, I mean, you're scooping out foam. There's not much of a technique to it. You can go clockwise, which I find helps sometimes. You can go in rows. You can go in columns, whatever. The opposite of what my hand was just doing. So at that point, you're just taking off impurities. Then, step number 10, and it's an exciting step. You're getting ready now. Things are starting to reduce. Your finishing pan, which for us is right here, everything is coming into the finishing pan. And you're getting ready now to take it off the heat and bottle it. So you're watching it very, very, very carefully. And you're bringing every last drop into the finishing pan from the other pans. Then you're going to, there's not going to be enough left in those pans. So step 11 maybe would be to take that sap, whatever's left in those pans, and dump it in your finishing pan. And then your finishing pan will go up, but it'll be very concentrated, even though you just diluted it with that stuff. Anyway, I'm getting too much into the details now, but reduce your pans down to one pan, which is your final finishing pan, and now you're going to bring that one down. You're going to use something like this to determine how far from the bottom you need to be. Now, if you're really good at it and you've been doing this like my grandfather did for 30 years, you'll know when it's time. You'll smell it, you'll see it, the consistency is different, the viscosity is different. You'll know, you'll get a feel for when it's ready. But for us newbies, you'll want to take it off before it burns. It's better to take it off early than it is to let it burn. I only had one pan last year that burned, and it happens to everyone that makes syrup. So try not to let it happen, but if it does, don't get discouraged because everybody burns a pan once in a while. If you're not, then you're not making enough syrup. Take it off sooner than later, and if you have to, finish it in a pot like this on the stove inside the house. It won't cost you that much electricity to just finish it off. Step number 12 would be an important note here is don't ever let any pan get below an inch. That was one thing my grandfather told me is you want to have at least an inch of liquid in there. If it's less than an inch, then you combine your pans. Once you get down to the finishing pan and it gets to about half an inch on your spoon, right? You're using this spoon, you put little notches there or whatever you have, a stick, popsicle stick would work. And when you get to about half an inch, that's when you're ready to take it off and dump it in your container. Step number 13 is an additional filtration step. So you're going to have a cloth on your container that you're catching it in. So a big pot like this works great. And you put your cloth over top there with an elastic or a rubber band of some kind, and clothespins work great. And you're going to filter it one last time. So that's 3 times now you've filtered it. And we'll actually sometimes filter a 4th time inside the house. Actually, generally we do. So here you're dumping it in, being very, very careful because it's super hot, and trying not to spill any, going slow but steady enough that it's coming out at a good rate. Get it all in there, let it go down a little bit, put your pan down if you have to, don't burn yourself. And once it's all settled and leaked in there, you can even leave it overnight if you want. There's no harm done in just letting it sit there overnight and really get every last drop out of it. It's gravity. So step number 14 would be grabbing your pot and bringing it inside the house. Once you get it in the house, you're going to filter it one more time by putting these cloths, and make sure the cloths that you're using are white cotton cloths, no other chemicals or anything in there. Very, basic cotton cloths. And when you wash them also, a little side note, don't use any bleach or detergents. You have to only rinse them with very hot water, and that will sterilize them enough and not give your syrup any tastes, because the last thing you want to do is contaminate your syrup. After all the process of gathering it and boiling it off, last thing you want to do is contaminate it with something, either a bacteria or some kind of a taste from a chemical or detergent. So be very careful with that. So another side note here, be sure not to put hot syrup in a cold pot or a cold mason jar, or else it will crack the bottom of it. So what you can do if you're bottling it right away or you're canning it right away is you can put it on a cloth or a towel on the counter and then put it over top of that. So just make sure you don't transfer to a cold surface, or otherwise it'll crack your mason jars and you'll lose all your syrup. Step number 15, once you've got everything canned and you've made sure to heat up your mason jars so that they can take a proper seal with wax, you have to look that up. You have to know a little bit about canning here to really preserve your maple syrup properly with the wax paper and the heat. So make sure you follow those steps on another video about canning. And maybe eventually we'll do one specifically on that on this channel. And once you've sealed everything up and you're ready to store things, maple syrup can keep open in a jar for up to a week. It'll last in a fridge for a good year, I would say, unopened. And in the freezer indefinitely. If you make your syrup very thick and very good and very pure, it will not freeze. It will just become a sludge. And once you take it out of the freezer, it's syrup again. So that's pretty much it. Hopefully that wasn't too long and extensive. 15 steps of how to make maple syrup. And like I said before, if you want to see the whole process in action here for 2019, you can tune in to our channel and we'll have some video logs going on the whole process of how it's going this year. So good luck with your maple syrup making, and we'll see you soon on the channel. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll catch you next time. Take care. Oh, hello there, my friends. Here from the people in our community. The many people, places, and things that define us. I'm looking down here. Thanks for joining me for this new series of Great Canadian Adventures. Canadian. Thanks for joining me for this new series of Great Canadian Adventures. In our adventures, we're going to look at with one of the great staples of Canadian diet. I don't remember what step I was at. And branch our way out from here. Just making shit up. There's many, many amazing historic locations around here in our community. Oh, hello there, my friends. Oh, hello, my friends. Oh, hello there, my friends. Hello there, my friends. Oh, hello there, my friends. We'll visit various hiking trails, wildlife reserves, sanctuaries, conservation areas, ghost towns, farms, homesteads, and much, much more.
Like that?
Done.